Hello, Radhika.
Hi, Sharda.
Okay, so this is our Living Tamil LitFest guest speaker series. Living Tamil LitFest is happening in New York on April 3rd and 4th, and we've been introducing the guest speakers that are attending the event. And today we'll be talking about Peter Constantine, right?
Mhm.
Peter Constantine is an award-winning American literary translator. So we started researching him. And before we get into the who and how of Peter Constantine, I want to ask you if you remember what happened that afternoon when you started researching him.
Remember very vividly. When I read his bio for the first time, I literally did a double take. I had this moment where I had a reaction. How is this even possible? That was my initial reaction, and I remember calling you within 5 seconds of reading his bio and finding out that you had had the exact same reaction, right?
Yeah, yeah. I think we even said the same words out loud at the same time.
Yeah.
Who
Who is
is
this
this
person?
person,
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Right.
who is Peter Constantine? Yeah, I
Mhm.
already said he's an award-winning literary translator.
Mhm.
When he's known for bringing major European classics and somewhat less well-known works into English. And when you usually look into the background of a literary translator, you find someone who has immersed themselves in one language or maybe even like one specific area in a language, like let's say French poetry or something,
Mhm.
for decades, 40 years. What did we find when we looked into Peter Constantine? For one, he translates into not one, but three languages:
Yeah.
English, German, and modern Greek.
Mhm.
But let me read out the list of languages he translates from. Okay.
The long list.
Yeah. Russian, German,
Mhm.
French, modern Greek, ancient Greek, Italian, Albanian, Dutch, Slovene, Icelandic, Polish, Japanese, Haitian Creole, Arvanitika, Romani, Afrikaans, and that is not even the complete list, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not just the number, but it's just the diversity of the languages, right? I mean, they're
Yes.
from different language families. Some are modern, some are ancient. It's staggering, really.
It is staggering. And he's versatile in other ways too.
Mhm.
He doesn't specialize in prose or poetry. He does all of them. Prose, poetry, plays, all of them. Yeah, and he's won so many accolades for his work. He's won the Penn Translation Prize, the National Translation Award, and Koret, a Jewish Literature Award. He's also the director of the Translation Studies Department at UConn, and he's also a publisher at World Poetry Books, which
Mhm.
specializes in bringing translated poetry into English. And uh, in addition to all of this, he's also published a novel,
Mhm.
right,
Mhm.
recently. Yeah, the list goes on.
Yeah, and Peter is the one of the terminal speakers of an endangered language called Arvanitika. This is a form of medieval Albanian that, well, it's spoken in parts of Greece. We'll talk more about it later. But Peter also has some really surprising aspects to his uh, career and personality, right? We'll get to
Yeah.
that later.
Yeah, he has a couple of very interesting dimensions. I'm glad you brought up Arvanitika. His language reclamation project is a major part of his work that he's been working on recently.
Mhm.
Yeah, when you try to peel back the layers of a person like this, you find so many interesting things. To understand Peter, we have to go all the way back to his early years, right?
Yeah. Peter's background in childhood is, as you mentioned, it's quite central to his story and to his career. His upbringing exposed him naturally to a wide variety of languages, as we'll see. So Peter was born in 1963 in Britain to a British father of Turkish origin and an Austrian mother. The family moves to Greece when he's 3 years old. His mother insists that Peter speak with him only in German. His father insists that Peter speak with him only in English. And his father, we'll see that he has abandoned all traces of his Turkish origin, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And Peter also picks up some Slavic dialects when he goes to spend time with his grandparents in Austria over
Yeah.
summers. Now, when Peter's 10 years old, his parents break up, and his mom and him they go live in a shanty town outside of Athens. And this
Mhm.
is where Peter is exposed to a lot of street languages. This is where he hears Arvanitika for the first time. And he also picks up some Romani, which is the language of the Roma people who camped in the area from time to time. Apart from this, Peter goes to an international school and where he chooses the medium of instruction to be Russian, another language right there. He also is exposed to Afrikaans. He learns Afrikaans because, interestingly enough, during that time, a group of Afrikaner of Greek origin moved back to Greece from South Africa because of political turmoil there. And guess what other language he picks up this time? He picks up Sanskrit. He learns Sanskrit at school.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
this is a really long list of languages for a teenager, right?
Yeah. And it's not like he's just picking up a few words here and there. When it looks like when he's interested in it, he wants to go all the way. And when the Afrikaner moved in to Greek, like you said, he even wants to do his entire education in Afrikaans and take O levels in Afrikaans, which is like the final exams, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the commitment to
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
languages. And all this is he's what, 16, 17? This
Yeah,
is
around
high
that.
school.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So we know that after high school, he moved to Austria for a couple of years. But then the trail kind of goes cold, right? We weren't really able to find out much about his 20s at all. We know that he moved to America in 1983,
Mhm, mhm.
but not much about what happened during that time, right?
Although we did find some interesting tidbit that we'll share later, right?
Yes, yes. There is one
Uh-huh.
very interesting. Yeah, we'll say that for later.
Mhm.
So, yeah, the next thing we know, he has published a book on Japanese street slang of all things in 1992.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so it looks like he did spend some time in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s researching for this book. So the initial inspiration seems to have been that like Japan was a rising economic power at that time, and people were generally interested in learning that language. But whatever was available, the books, manuals were he were not enough for Peter, let's say. He wanted something more. He wanted to know the street languages, like language as it was spoken in not polite company, right? Like so, he wanted to get the full picture. He felt like that didn't give a full picture of the Japanese society,
Right.
and he goes deep into it. And in this book, he covers all the forbidden hidden languages, the private language that are used by all the various subcultures in Japanese society, like sex trade workers,
Mhm. Yeah.
the criminal underworld,
Mhm.
but also teenagers, like the slang they use, the pop culture. So it's a very interesting book. It is actually available online to look through a few pages. And this book was very well received, and he ends up publishing a couple of sequels to it, which are even more
I see.
spicy.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, during this period, he also gets interested in literary translation.
Mhm.
So he tries his hand at it and he finds that he loves it. And
Mhm.
in 1998, his first book of literary translation is published. It's six early stories of Thomas Mann that
Mhm.
haven't previously been published in English.
Right.
And that causes a bit of a sensation. He wins the Penn Translation Prize for it,
Mhm. Mhm.
and that kind of launches his career in literary translation.
Right.
And in the next few years, he's becoming more and more well known as a translator. Like translators were not that visible during those days, but he's causing a sensation.
Mhm.
And he seems to have an interest in bringing previously unknown, neglected, forgotten works and bringing them to English.
Mhm.
And the next book he publishes is the Undiscovered Chekhov.
Right.
Uh, I think he translates like 38 new stories of Chekhov that were
Right.
not available in English, and
Mhm.
he wins a prize for it, the National
National
Translation
translation.
Prize,
Yeah,
and he
that's
also
right.
wins the Koret Jewish Literature Award for the complete works of Isaac Babel. Yeah,
Mhm.
so this
Yeah.
is very successful early career.
Yeah, and in talking about his early work, another notable book that he translated was Siberian Notebook by
Yes,
Dostoevsky, right?
yes, yeah,
Uh,
that's a very curious work. Yeah,
it
tell me.
is. So Dostoevsky, as we know, he spent some time in the Siberian labor camp, the Gulag, and the inmates of the Gulag, they had their own language, like a hidden or secret language that they used to communicate privately, so they wouldn't be understood by the guards. Dostoevsky, he recorded this language I think on strips of cardboard or other fabric, whatever
Mhm.
material he could
Mhm.
find.
Yeah, he sews them with coat strings.
Right. And the Siberian Notebook is this record of Dostoevsky, of this language by Dostoevsky, and this has been translated by Peter Constantine. This language was called Fenya, and it was a very dynamic language because it had to keep the inmates had to keep changing the language as the guards figured out what they meant. The inmates would have to figure out new ways to communicate privately.
Mhm.
So this is just a very interesting thing that Peter has worked on.
Yeah, he
And
seems to have this interest in picking up like
yeah,
these very interesting works,
correct,
right? That are
right.
unknown. Yeah,
Mhm,
yeah,
mhm.
yeah. Yeah, then he does a few classics, doesn't he?
Yes, yeah. So he works on several well-known authors. He translates Tolstoy, he translates Gogol, and he also translates Ismail Kadare, an Albanian author. And then he also retranslates some really old works, such as Machiavelli, Rousseau, Voltaire, which are a little bit more recent, but still old, right? And from there, his translation career just really it continues to grow and grow further,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, yeah, he's known for even with the retranslation, he's known for the more natural sounding versions
Right.
of those. Yeah, and yeah, this is he spends I think 30 years as a professional translator,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like he's not an academic at this point. Like so he's joined UConn in 2016. So
Mm-hmm.
until then he was purely a translator, and over these 30 years as a practitioner he's kind of developed his own translation process and also a philosophy of translation. Yeah, I thought his translation process was very interesting, right? Like so he likes to read the work first fully, but
Mm-hmm.
then kind of develop an amnesia and go back to it after a certain period of time and then try to read it with fresh eyes and then translate it. I thought that was very interesting. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and but it's not a prescription for everyone. He says that every translator needs to find their own process and find what works for them. Some people like to do entire drafts before
Right.
go back and edit them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm. That's
and
true.
yeah, his philosophy in translation. How would you say what is the core tenets of his philosophy? I think what was most striking to me was that the major theme that emerges is that he wants to stay true to the voice of the original, right? Like the spirit
Right.
of the original, and
Right.
bring the pitch and rhythm of the original author to the target language. And he is not for more literal translation or trying to. Uh, yeah, like some translator tend towards that, and
Mm-hmm.
he does not prefer that. He wants to bring the spirit more than the word to word.
Right. In talking about literal translation versus paraphrasing, he uses a very interesting metaphor of a tightrope artist. So he says that if you metaphrase or if you use a literal translation, then it's going to keep you from falling off the rope if you're a tightrope artist, but it's not going to be very elegant. And he
Mhm.
also says like it's like dancing with tied legs. I thought that image is very interesting.
Yeah, that's a very arresting metaphor. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
What else does he have to say about the philosophy of translation itself?
He says again, as you mentioned, that the rhythm and pitch of the writer is more important than the words used. Again, we
Hmm.
covered that when we spoke
Hmm.
about metaphrasing and paraphrasing. He also says that the command over the target language is much more important than the command over the source language. So, for example, if you're translating Proust into English, then your English better be as good as Proust French. And for
Hmm.
this reason, he asks translators to keep widening their breadth in the target language, to keep reading widely and as much as they can. And related to reading, there's an interesting quote by Peter. He says that, in my view, and I quote, a translation is the closest possible reading of a text. I think that regardless of how often you read a literary work or how deeply you study it, you will never be able to experience it as intimately as you will if you set out to translate it. I think this says a lot about how he views translation, right?
Yeah, it's ultimately a creative work,
It
right?
really
It
is.
is a creative work, not it's not just an academic endeavor. Yeah.
That's true. He
Mhm.
also says that translators have to know the fit of authors. They have to know which authors work for them and which don't, and they
Mhm.
also have to be aware of their range and their limitations before they pick up
Mhm.
works. Um, and another thing he says is that you don't really need to be familiar with the author's entire body of work before you translate one of their works. And again, although he works in translation theory, he's a practitioner first. So he says that while it's certainly worthwhile to learn the craft
Mhm.
methodically, ultimately translation is a creative endeavor, as we said earlier, and one should not let theory cramp their style.
Yeah, yeah, I can totally agree with that. Yeah. And so yeah, so he's been practicing since the 80s, late 80s, right? So translation scene has changed so much in these 40 years. And you did some research on that, right?
Yeah. So, as we know, I remember reading books, translated works earlier, and not even knowing who did the translation. The name wouldn't even be mentioned on
Yeah.
the cover page, right?
Even
So,
now, even now you can find
even
some
now,
books like that.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So Peter talks about a very clear before 2009 and after 2009 distinction. So in the academic world, 2009 was the year when the translator came out of the shadow, so to speak. Up until then, if you were a professor, you might even want to hide your translations because they were not really considered serious or scholarly work. So
Mhm.
what happened in 2009? In 2009, Catherine Porter, who was the president of the MLA, which is the Modern Language Association, she made translation a central theme of that year's annual convention. And this created like a profound shift and legitimized translation as a work of high-level scholarship. And which is why we have the vibrant academic discipline of translation today. And translation has continued to change since then, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Like you said, like looks like most of the translation studies departments in major universities have been set up after 2009, right?
Of course,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and the scene continues to evolve. We know what happened in the past few years, like machine assisted translation, and there is this we the future is that when Peter says that's where the future, that's where it
Hmm.
might be going, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
We might translator might just become editors of assisted translation.
Hmm.
He is never going to embrace that personally,
Hmm.
but that could be the future. But yeah, but the human element can never be taken out of the equation
Hmm.
because ultimately it's a creative work.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what Peter says. Mhm.
That. Yeah. So we spoke about his role as a literary translator and an academic, but Peter has several dimensions to him, right?
Yeah, yeah.
He's also a writer, for example.
Yeah, yeah, and he has a couple more surprises we'll talk about later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he has published a novel
Hmm.
in 2023, and the novel is called The Purchased Bride.
Hmm.
And this is based on his real life. It is a work of fiction. It's not a memoir, but it is based on his real life. It is set in the Ottoman Empire it starts in 1909. And the Purchased Bride in the title is based on his own grandmother. And during this time in the Ottoman Empire, there was this trend among the Ottoman gentlemen of a certain class to basically purchase girls, young girls of Greek or Russian origin to be added to their list of wives and concubines, right? And this novel starts there. And
Hmm.
his own grandmother was 13 when she married his grandfather, who was almost 50 at that time. So this
Right.
novel
Yeah.
starts at the point where his grandfather and his first wife, curiously, they visit this young girl
Hmm.
that they've recently purchased to see if she would be a good fit for their family. And what an
Okay.
interesting start for a novel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
this Turkish past has been completely erased. And it's his dad never wanted to. I mean, of all these list of languages, what we don't find Turkish, right?
Right.
That he knows. So his Turkish past has been like a taboo in his family,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
this is Peter's way of reaching back in time and trying to explore that side of his family.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Another.
and
Yeah.
mhm.
Sorry. Go
Go
ahead.
on. Yeah,
I was
yeah,
going to
that's
say
him
that.
as a novelist, but
Yeah.
yeah, like we said, like several other projects that he's working on, and like endangered languages.
that is a very significant part of his career, right? So his work in trying to revitalize endangered languages. So as you mentioned earlier, Peter is one of the terminal speakers of Arvanitika, which is a form of medieval Albanian spoken in parts of Greece. By terminal speaker, I mean one of the last speakers of the language. Um, I found this idea of him being a terminal speaker just incredibly sad. He talks about how he very literally has no one to talk Arvanitika with, and so
Mhm.
he talks to himself. And the knowledge that if he forgets a word, then it's just going to fade away. It's going to be lost forever, right? That
Mhm.
must be so heavy, and it must be so lonely to be a terminal speaker of a language, right?
Yeah, like it's yeah, it is very sad, like you said, that whole idea of like bearing this burden of
Hmm.
carrying this to the future. Yeah.
Hmm.
So Arvanitika, so how does he learn Arvanitika? How does that come into his life? We know that Arvanitika, he was exposed to that when he was living in the shanty towns outside Athens. But
Hmm.
he has the second encounter with Arvanitika, which is what uh, uh, made it more significant in his life, right? Like,
Right.
so his mother remarries when he is 16 years old, and
Hmm.
they move to Corinth, where Arvanitika is more prevalent. Like it's spoken in the village where he
Hmm.
lived, and his stepfather's family is one of the families that speaks Arvanitika, and his uncle, who was one of the patriarchs of the family. He is one of the last fluent speakers of Arvanitika. He finds that in that village, Arvanitika is still spoken, but not fully, right? Like we talk about how languages die. So this is
Right.
how it happens. So it is spoken, but not really. Like the people
Right.
start off like one or two words and then switch to Greek. And there
Hmm.
was also not any interest in saving or keeping the language. People
Yeah.
wanted to shed their Arvanitika identity and become more Greek. That's where
Right.
the trend was.
Right.
Trend was. And but his uncle was very passionate about the
Hmm.
language, and he was so happy to see that this young man from Athens was could actually speak that language, and both
Right.
embark on this project of saving Arvanitika for future generations. Basically, they create
Hmm.
audio recordings, and his uncle writes a lot of original literature. He's
Uh-huh.
the only and last poet of Arvanitika. He's
Hmm.
written poems in Arvanitika, and this sets him off on this larger project of language reclamation, right? So, what is language reclamation really? Like there is so languages, there is it's not the same as revitalization, where in revitalization like there are still a few speakers and then you want to increase the number of speakers.
Right.
But language reclamation projects are different in that these languages
A
are
dead.
literally dead for a couple of
Yeah.
centuries.
Hmm.
The
Hmm.
last speaker was 200 years ago,
Hmm.
and then you have basically like a few words here and there and some sources that you're trying to put together this language, and that is a project that's happening in many indigenous communities all over the world.
Hmm.
And basically, Peter and his uncle, they see that there's not much interest in the community for Advaita right now, but in a couple of generations, there
It
might be
could.
interest in
Yeah.
reclamation, and they want to create this body of work for
Hmm.
future
Hmm.
reclamation,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you also want to talk about what you found about how the work he has done on language reclamation in Wampanoag and some other languages around the world?
Yeah, yeah. So he's working on, I think, a book on language reclamation. He's been researching all over the world, and he talks about at least two
Dead languages, right?
communities. Yeah,
Oh,
the
yeah.
one in Massachusetts and
Hmm.
Palawakani in Tasmania.
Hmm.
Every community does it differently. When they try to reclaim for example, in Massachusetts, they have one Bible and like kind of a Rosetta Stone created by the missionaries who actually destroyed their language, but that is what's helping them reclaim the language.
Right.
But it's a very sad, kind of a losing battle for these communities usually,
That is
right?
true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Finally, we come to one of the more surprising elements of Peter's career, right? Which is his work as a mixed media artist.
Mm.
Peter is a mixed media artist, and his work combines Bronze Age Greek hieroglyphs with human figures. And because these are Bronze Age hieroglyphs, sometimes we know the meanings, but not the sounds. Sometimes we know the sounds, but not the meanings. and sometimes we know neither the meaning nor the sound. They're just shapes and lines on which he has superimposed human forms, right? Um, but you can Peter's work can be found on his Instagram. The handle is Constantine_studio. Now, I highly recommend that you go in and check it out. Through his artwork, Peter is really exploring the issue of language extinction. And I'll admit that when I saw his art for the first time, I didn't really quite understand it. But as I read about it, I saw how it was linked to the work that he does as a conservationist. And it was really touching, really. What did you think of his art?
Yeah, yeah. I remember when you found this, like we'd been already researching Peter at that point, right? And
Yeah.
he was academic, and we find more and more layers.
Uh-huh,
And then
uh-huh,
out of nowhere comes
uh-huh,
this. He's an
right.
artist too.
Uh-huh,
Yeah,
uh-huh,
and like when we his website is very beautiful, and he
mhm.
has pictures of all this art, and it is very visually striking. I
It
found
is.
it very appealing
Mhm,
visually, but
mhm,
I
mhm,
didn't quite understand it, like you said. But there is this book that
mhm.
you can find on his website too. It's called Lost Words, Lost Worlds,
Mhm.
and there he talks about the meaning of his art and why he's embarked on this project. And it's
Right.
very beautiful. It's about language extinction, and that is we are intuitively aware, or at least we've been informed of ecological catastrophe in the
Yeah.
biological sense,
Mhm.
like that's been drummed into us, and why
Yeah.
that's. But like linguistic catastrophe, like that's not something we talk about that much, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, so we found that there are like 6 to 7,000 languages that are spoken, but like 40% of them are endangered, and
Endangered.
a language dies, one language dies every 2 weeks. And
Wow.
yeah, so, and fewer than 100 languages are even available in the digital space, right? Like,
Mhm.
yeah, so many, and it is becoming a monoculture of 2 or 3 languages dominating the world space. And why do we even need to care about it? That's something also we need to talk about. Like
Mhm.
languages, like why not have 2 or 3 language, English, couple of
Right.
other languages. So
Mhm.
he has this very beautiful quote in his book that I'd like to read.
Mhm.
So he says, when a language becomes extinct,
Mhm.
it takes with it more than just its words to a silent grave. With it disappear millennia of culture, knowledge, and tradition. Its unique interpretation of the world unravels and dies. Yeah. So again, this is something, it seems easy to understand, but not really. We have this challenge in the diaspora, right? We see how easily a language can die
Right.
within a generation. Like, yeah, your
Yeah.
parents speak, and the kids, they just don't. That's it. It's
Yeah.
gone. We
Mhm.
take it for granted, but it's not so easy, right?
Mhm. Yeah. A language takes millennia to evolve, but it can die within just a
Yeah,
generation,
in
just like
just
that.
a generation. Yes, yes.
So I think Peter's artwork in many ways is a call to action
Mhm.
for all of us, right? Languages are fragile, as we have seen, and if they are not used, but if they are used, languages can be really resilient. They can adapt and they can evolve and they can survive. And I think we all have a role to play in keeping our languages from going silent.
Yeah, yeah. On that very inspiring note,
Mhm.
I think we can end. But oh,
Yeah, we forgot something.
yeah, we have one more thing that we found about Peter, right? One
Yeah.
very another interesting dimension of his. Yeah. Do you want to
Mhm.
share that?
Yeah, so we know that Peter spent some time in Vienna as a and then he moved to New York City in 1983. So we found that he moved to the city, to New York City, to learn African American dance forms in the Alvin Ailey Dance Theater. How interesting is that?
Yeah, he was a dancer in Vienna before he moved here,
He
right?
was, right.
Who knows? Maybe will in the future he might explore another heavy subject through dance, maybe language extension to dance too. Yeah, he keeps surprising us, doesn't he?
Yeah, we'll have to ask him about this when we meet him.
Yes, definitely. Okay.
Okay.
Do we have
Yeah,
anything
that was
more?
a good conversation then.
Yeah.